Now, while I do not expect this to be a source of question, class, but at least this would give you an idea as to what rights would result in an asset. Obviously, rights to receive cash, and you should already be familiar with accounts receivable class. Essentially, these all our receivables class that are payable in money represents this kind of rights. Okay. Now, as I go over these items class, I would end up connecting the items enumerated in the framework with assets that are already existing, assets that are already governed by the standards. Supposedly, that's not how we are going to approach this one. That we are going to match the standards with the framework class because we really do not have to make the standard conform to the framework class, but just for us to have a correct understanding, just for us to develop the correct mindset on how to approach the standards in the future, I am left with no choice but to connect the provisions of the framework with existing standards. Rights to receive goods or services. So uh, if you paid your supplier in advance class, then you will already have advances to suppliers. And these advances to suppliers class represents your right to receive goods or services to your from your supplier class. That's why you can already recognize the asset, the advances to suppliers. I hope you understand that advances from suppliers and advances to suppliers are different. Kasi if we're the one giving advance payment to our suppliers, it would be recognized as an asset, specifically as advances to suppliers. If our suppliers gave us, or if our suppliers made advance deliveries class, then that would be considered a liability, specifically advances from suppliers. Although again, this is not a concern for CFAS class because again, we will not be talking about entries and we should not be talking about account titles yet. But just to give you a concrete idea as to what the framework is talking about. The third item here, class, rights to exchange. You have example here, an option contract, a forward contract, which allows you to exchange financial assets class under favorable terms. Okay. At this point, you did not bother yourselves. You did not stress yourselves over this one. Financial assets class are governed by PFRS 9, which would be a far long down the road pa class. So this should not be. Do not let this be a source of stress at this point. So basically, framework tells us that there are two major group of rights. Uh, rights that imposes an obligation to another party, and the second class, rights over property class. If you ask anyone, a common thinking of what an asset is would definitely be any property or rights. Okay, so if you ask anyone, one would say that assets are those properties or rights that you own or you possess. So basically, same thinking is consistent with what the framework contains class. That rights can be categorized into those that imposes obligation to another party for our benefit and rights over properties class. Yeah. So at this point, it's also important to clarify that the reason physical items class, why uh, property, plant, and equipment, buildings, machineries are recognized as an asset, not because of their mere existence class, but because we have right over those assets. Okay, because they can be a subject of ownership class, they can be subject of control, they can be subject of appropriation. Then these items can be treated as an asset. So basically, assets is equal to rights. But of course, the other parts, the other requirements must also be present. Just to illustrate class, going back to rights to receive goods or services class. You can have this asset, advances to suppliers class, as a result of a past event. And what past event am I referring to? The fact that you made payments in advance to your uh, in advance to your suppliers. You obtain the right to receive goods or services class because of the advance payment that you've made. Now, what what if you have an existing supplier class? You have a committed relationship with your uh, supplier, okay, and you have already agreed that there will be a delivery from your supplier to you next week. Let's just say next month, okay. At this point, do you already have an asset? Can you recognize as an asset the goods that will be delivered to you? The answer is no, because the goods are not yet with you. Okay? Can you recognize an asset as far as the right to receive? As far as the right to receive the goods are concerned? The answer is still no, because you have not done anything to warrant to warrant a right over the goods class. Okay? So my point, class, is indeed assets is equal to rights. Okay? But if you do not have control over these rights, class, then you cannot have an asset yet. So going back to the example, what was the agreement for your supplier to deliver goods to you? What will be delivered to you? The goods. At this point, where the goods were not yet delivered to you, can you already recognize the goods as an asset? Can you already treat the goods as your asset? The answer is no, because you do not have control over the goods yet. Why do you not have any control over the goods? Because they were not yet delivered to you. Who has control over these goods? It is still the supplier. Then, possible alternative. Do I at least have an asset representing my right to receive the goods? The answer is still no, because you have not yet earned it. You have not perfected the rights to receive goods class. Why? Because you have not yet made any payment. Now, going back to the definition of an asset, what is not present here? An asset must come from past events class. Okay. So if you have not made any payment class, then there is no past event that gave rise to your right yet. Just because you've agreed does not give you any unconditional right to receive goods yet. But once you make a payment class, then you will already have an unconditional right to receive the goods. And the payment class, the prior payment, the advance payment will constitute your past event. Okay? So all the other elements must concur, class, for there to be an asset.